Okay, the Good News series is continuing tonight. And tonight I have the privilege of sharing the good news for the offended. The good news for the offended. How many of you been to DNA before? Whoa, come on, I love it. DNA is our crash course in the culture of Grove and what we're all about, what we believe, the cultures of the church. And one of our cultures as a church community is the unoffendable heart. The unoffendable heart. And every single time at DNA, I always share the story of a dream that Christy Brent, who's married to Brian Brent, they started the Circuit Riders with YWAM. And she had this dream, and I always share the story of her dream. And in this dream, what she did, she was walking on the street, and then all of a sudden, as she was walking on the street, there was two guys that had black masks that were like they're gonna jump her or something like that. And she was shocked when they ran at her, and then they stopped right in front of her. And she was just shocked by it, and then they just started talking to her. And as they started talking to her, they started making fun of her. They started accusing her and saying things that are just really mean, right? And it started out more on the surface level, like, nobody likes you. You're a horrible mom. You know, some of these like general things on the surface. And after they said that, they stopped to see how she was going to respond. And she said, "Oh my goodness, you guys are so creative." And then they continued to start accusing her, but kind of went another level down. And they're like, "You're fat and ugly. Your husband isn't even attracted to you. He never has been." You know, like kind of that's really mean stuff that they started speaking over her. And she responded in that, then they stopped and waited for her to respond. And she said, "Oh man, you guys are the best. You just don't even know who you are. You're amazing." And then they went down to like the level where there's only insecurities that she only knows about, nobody else does. And they started pulling those out and speaking those as accusation over her. Like really, these are fighting words. And they stopped right after that, and she went, "Oh my goodness," and looked at them right in their little eye holes through their masks, and looked at them right in the eyes and said, "Oh my goodness, I love both of you so much." And right when she said that, the streets were filled with media, and there was cameras, and there was microphones, and there was like a boom mic. I used to be a videographer, so I know what that means. And they were going and they converged on her. And they said, "How did you do it? How did you win the insult game? This is a TV show, and we do this, and nobody has ever won the insult game. How did you do it?" And the dream was over. We're all destined to live with unoffendable hearts. Your destiny is to be unoffendable. Turn in your Bibles to Matthew 24. Matthew 24. It's going to be a good night. Tonight, I have good news for those that thought their spouse was going to follow through on the vows. Tonight, I have good news for those that thought they were going to get their promotion. Tonight, I have good news for those that thought when they got home that the room was going to be cleaned, that the house is going to be clean. Tonight, I have good news for those that thought that someone, just anyone, would come to their defense. Tonight, I have good news for those that thought they were going to get celebrated on their birthday, and then nobody did. Tonight, I have good news for those that didn't get invited to the party and saw on social media the group, the hangout, that didn't get invited. Tonight, I have good news for those that are caught in the system of our culture of injustice, where there's a glass ceiling over you and there's systematic oppression in your life, there's good news for you tonight. Tonight, there's good news for those of us that have just decided it's always going to be this way. That's just how it's going to be. It's always going to be this way. There's no hope. From today into tomorrow, I just can't see any other way, my life looking any other way. Matthew 24 in verse 12, why don't you read with me? It says, "And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of" how many? Many will grow cold. That word many means the majority in Greek. And because lawlessness will be increased, what does that mean? That means people will live as a god unto themselves, and then they'll start sinning against God, and they'll sin against each other. And the sin towards each other and to God is going to increase as the years go by and as we get closer to Jesus coming back. I am so excited for Jesus to come back. I really am. Because there's going to be a day where the sun is going to go dark, and the moon, because it's a reflection of the sun's light, is going to go dark too. And the stars are going to go dark, and it's going to be pitch black across the globe. And there, coming in the east, is going to be Jesus, the Jewish man, who's 6 foot tall. Maybe he's not 6 feet. I think he's like 5'3", okay? I don't know if his resurrected body, if he's taller or like the same size. 5'3", they were shorter back then. Listen. There is a day coming where Jesus, his appearing is going to be like lightning in the sky against a pitch black background, and every eye is going to see him. He's going to ride on the clouds, our coming King. That day is one day closer than it was yesterday, right? I'm not, this isn't a message on eschatology. I'm not going to get into when I think Jesus is going to return, okay? But I will say this, we're one day closer. But as he gets closer and the day of his appearing gets closer, it says that lawlessness and sin is going to increase in the world. That's just the reality. That's what he says. That's what's starting to happen, right? And what that means is this: the opportunities of us getting mistreated are getting increased. And the opportunities for us to be offended are exponentially growing. And what happens is he's saying, when that takes place, the love of many will grow cold. Because listen, everyone, all of us, everyone, every day has opportunities for offense. Everyone, every day has conversations, circumstances, people doing things or not doing things that are opportunities for offense all of the time. And I believe that what's at stake is the destiny of our lives, but also the lives of our families, our friends, our communities. This topic, I believe that so much of your life hinges on how you carry and how you respond to those opportunities that are in everyday life. Your life 10 years from now, if we don't get this message tonight, your life 10 years from now will be completely different. And so this is so important. I believe there's a battle raging over this topic of offense in everyday life. So Matthew 4 just said we have everyone, every day has opportunities for offense. And our purpose is, I don't want to grow cold. I don't want to grow cold. I want to be the type of person that walks in the room and it's like a warm blanket. It's like, hi, and just warmth. Right? If you have a cold personality, there's something wrong. You were never destined to have a cold personality. It was supposed to be warmth when you walked in the room. If you're cold, then this message is for you. You guys have the privilege of being in the first service ever where Pastor Josh pulls out a prop during his sermon. Offense is like offense. Now, I can't take credit for this. I have to be honest. Scotty V, who preached last week, his idea, okay? So everybody say, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. All right. Offense is like offense. What are fences for? Keeping people out, keeping things out, keeping dangers out, right? And then keeping important things in, like soccer balls, footballs, pets, children. That's a good point. That's a good one. Yes, children, that's very important. Keeping children safe. So it keeps things out and keeps things in. Keeps threats out. Keeps things that we want to get protected on the inside. Is that right? Offense is like offense. It's good. There's an opportunity in everyday life, right? I talked about this opportunity to be offended because of things that people don't do or that they do. All right? I can't believe I said that. All right. There's an opportunity in everyday life. And what happens is that moment when someone does something or they don't do something, there's this moment of truth. Are we going to stuff the feelings that we have, or are we going to step right into forgiveness? Because if we stuff, what happens is offense starts growing just like a little bit of a seed gets planted. And it's like the fence just starts growing up a little bit, right? And what happens is if you continue to stuff the pain, the fence gets a little bit taller. It gets a little bit thicker. The slats start getting closer together. And what happens is inside of the fence, we're in protection mode. Because it hurt really bad. And the way that I'm going to protect and I'm going to make them pay is by withholding love and not forgiving. Because I think that I can maybe discipline them by giving them some cold shoulder. I think that I can get what I want and manipulate them by not treating them the way that I know that I would treat them if I was loving them well. Because then if I do that, I might get out of them what I want, them to change. And so I put up a little bit of a fence, and what happens is I don't see them as clearly as I used to. Because I'm looking through the lens of offense. And I can't see them as clearly as I did before. So then every time that they're interacting with me, I'm not seeing them fully. Because what happens is we start seeing their motives through the fence. And their motives become very black and white in our minds. Is that true? When there's a fence, somebody does something to me and I go, oh, I see what they were doing. See, I know that the reason why they did that, because they were trying to do this, and this. I know what their motives was. And it all becomes very black and white when we see through the fence. And what we're not realizing is all along the way, the fence starts growing up a little bit taller. What does it feel like when you are living with a fence? What does it sound like? Sounds like this. These are some phrases. So I want maybe just listen to go, I've said that subconsciously. You probably haven't said these things out loud because that would be a little intense, but you probably said them subconsciously and you thought them. I can't believe that they did that. Did you hear what they said? I will never trust again. No one understands. No one really gets it. No one really gets me. You don't know what I've been through. There's a lot of these things I'm sure you've vocalized verbally. And when I say you, I mean us. I learned my lesson not to trust. I'm different. I would never do that. I loved you, and this is what I get in return. I loved you that way, and this is how you treat me. Don't they remember what I did? They don't understand the weight of what they've done. They don't understand the implications of their sin against me. 20 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I'm still carrying this. They don't even get it. I'm going to withhold. I'm going to put up the fence so that they learn and so that they understand. Because if I hold on to the fence and if I build it tall enough, then maybe they'll get how much it hurt. Then they'll understand. I got to make them pay. How could I ever forgive them with what they've done? Fence. And what happens is this. With that circumstance and that pain that we went through, we built a fence towards them. But what we're not realizing is that that fence stays up when we go into other relationships. So then that's a fence in our hearts, and then we start seeing through the lens of the fence in our family, in our friendships, and we're even unaware of the lens that we're seeing through, but our expectation is pain. And so we've got to be in that protection mode, keep things out, right? It's a fence, so it's keeping the bad things out. It's protection. Because the pain hurts, the expectations are failed. I don't want to deal with the pain of failed expectations any longer, so I'm going to hold it. I'm going to hold on to it a little bit. This is what life is like behind the fence. You wake up in the morning, and subconsciously you have a bullet-pointed list of all of the reasons of why you're justified in not being okay. You wake up and you go, I have this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason of why I am justified to not be okay because of this circumstance and this person and what they did to me. I have all of these reasons. What happens when you live with offense is that you live as a powerless victim. And this is what it sounds like, and we've all said it. And so this message is not for the person that, whoa, man, they experienced trauma and this person really sinned against them and they struggle with a lot of bitterness. No, this is for all of us. I said everyone. Everyone has said this probably in the room. You made me feel ... When you did this, you made me feel ... Is that right? You made me feel angry. You made me feel hurt. You made me feel pain. You made me fill in the blank. How many of you said that? When you did this, you made me feel. Do you know what that's communicating? They're in the seat as the throne over our lives, and they're actually the ones that are in control of how I emotionally respond. So then they're the ones that dictate my day and how I'm doing because they've been given the seat of power in my life to dictate how do I feel? How am I emotionally? Well, it's dependent on them because they made me. See, that's called powerless victim. We're just a victim to whatever anybody does to us or says to us. That's what it feels like, and that's what it looks like to live with offense. What happens when we're living in this place is it can be very isolating. Is that true? It can feel lonely when we have offense. And so what happens is we try to love because we're good Christian people. And so we want connection. I want to feel known. I want to feel understood. I want to feel seen. I want connection with people. Is that right? Are you with me? Do we need culture of agreement? I know it's 8 p.m., but let's just wake up a little bit, okay? We're here. All right. So what happens is I want connection, but I've built up a fence. And so what I do is I throw over some love into a relationship. So I look at 5 love languages. I'm studying up, reading it. I'm like, okay, physical touch, that's not appropriate. So quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, and I can't remember the other one. And so I'm going to do that. But what we do is we throw that love over the fence in protection mode, and it has a string on it. And that love has a string, and what we've done is we've tied a hook onto the end of the string because we're trying to pull out the feeling of being seen and known and loved. And so we're going, I'm going to love, but really what the love is I have needs met. I'm giving you something so I can get something, and it's not love at all. Because love expects nothing in return. See, it's not seeking its own. And so you're throwing that string out just hoping it's going to catch somebody. But it changes how you love people when you're behind the fence. And sometimes it's even difficult to discern, was that done to manipulate to get, or was that freely given? Turn in your Bibles to 1 John. 1 John 4. So what happens when we live behind a fence is that it changes how we see other people, but it also does something that produces a cycle in our lives. And that is, we see people differently, so we interact with people differently. We interact with people through the lens of the fence. But other people don't see who we are when we have the fence up. So it impacts how we see people, but it also impacts what people see in you and how people relate with you. So now they can't see who you are because you're not bringing your whole self into the relationship. See, they're seeing something different than your destiny. They're seeing something different than who you were created to be. They're not seeing the real you because they can't see you because there's protection, because there's a fence. And when you have all of the walls up, what happens is this vicious cycle of you wonder why nobody wants to spend time with you, and it's because all they see is a fence. All they see is walking on eggshells because they're afraid that resentment is going to take root again. And so what happens is we want connection so bad, but we're stiff-arming everyone. They don't see who we are. And so, and we tried the string hook thing with love, and it wasn't working. And so we just invite them. We actually say, okay, please come over. Please just spend time with me. I want to hang out. And they come over, and we invite them to see through the fence. And we go, can you believe they're over at our house? Can you believe how that leader did that? Can you believe how my spouse treated me? And we start bringing them into the subtle slander of the offense of our own heart because we want camaraderie and connection, and all we're saturated in is offense. And so we want, and this is what happens. bitterness, it says in the Bible that bitterness defiles many. And so we defile them with our offense and our slander. So now their perspective is skewed as they're looking at the people that we're looking at. And you want to know how marriages and churches and organizations fall apart? It starts with these moments. When it's integrity and the motives that seem so clear to be black and white are called into question. Do you know what this reminds me of? Is the garden. It reminds me of Satan himself, the accuser of the brethren. He comes into the garden with offense. He comes into the garden with bitterness and resentment towards God. And as he's looking at God through the fence, he says, "Are you sure that's what God says?" And he questions the motives because he sees it as black and white. And all of a sudden, Adam and Eve get defiled by his bitterness, and they step in to the same place that he was. And it spreads like gangrene. It spreads like a disease, like a virus. When all along the way, humanity was meant to multiply and spread God's image. And it was supposed to spread just as rapidly as a virus, but it was supposed to rapidly spread as his image going everywhere. Your destiny is not to live behind a fence. Your destiny is to have real, authentic connection with God and people. 1 John 4, verse 18, read along with me here. It says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear." We're going to continue reading, but as I was reading, I was just reminded of something that I have to talk about. And that is, when we live behind a fence and we let it fester for a year, 2 years, and it starts building and we start getting more offense because now people are treating me different. Now I can't see anyone. And I start building more and more and more resentment and bitterness. And now all I can see is offense. What takes place is that we start using the same language that the enemy, that's the accuser, uses. And we start seeing people and seeing God the same way that the enemy sees people and God. And we start agreeing with the accuser. And what happens is we want people to come in and spend time with us, but what happens is demons start coming through the back door. Pastor Katie and I have led so many people through deliverance and freedom, and many of our leadership team have had the privilege of leading people into freedom from demons. But I want to tell you this, every single person that we've led into freedom from the demonic was a believer. There's this lie in the church that says Christians can't have demonic in their lives. And I want to break the news to you. It's actually a lie and it's not true. I know because it's happened over multiple dozen times that we've had the privilege of leading people into freedom. We've bought this lie that says, well, if the Holy Spirit's in me, then no demon can be in me. But we're spirit, soul, body. So the Holy Spirit's in your spirit, but you've opened up your soul to the demonic by agreeing with the accuser. And you have power. See, you have power to open doors to the enemy or keep them shut. And I'm not saying that if you have offense or bitterness or unforgiveness, that you have demons in your life or you have demons in your soul or anything like that. But what I am saying is it's dangerous ground. And the common denominator with many of the people that we've led into freedom from the demonic is unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment, and offense. It is like a super highway for the demonic. You holding on to unforgiveness is a super highway for the enemy. It's dangerous. Because what happens is accusation. It's like his name. The devil is named the accuser of the brethren. And we're going to agree with people and accuse people in our hearts. This is why I'm talking about, this is your destiny at stake in everyday life. Like, this is your family's future. This is your marriage in the future. This is your company, your business, your church. This is the ground that the enemy would love to take and keep the walls up. Keep the fence thick. Keep the slats closer so that you don't see. So you don't see him, so you don't see others, and you don't even see yourself. 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment. Whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love, why? Because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, who he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. See, there's this battle that we're in. Because we love receiving what God's given, but it's a different story when I have to give what I've been given. Forgiveness. We want what he gives, but we don't want to give what he gave in forgiveness. And I believe that there's a decision, there's a stake in the ground that we get to turn tonight. That tonight can actually be your day where you turn. Where there's a shift and there's a change, and it can be a joyful repentance. It can be a joyful turning. Whoa, I get to step into forgiveness? Yes, I get to turn away from the demonic, and I get to turn away from accusation. I get to turn away from all the offense and bitterness that I thought was keeping people disciplined for their wrongs that they've done, and all I'm starting to realize that is actually enslaving me. And all it felt like was shackles and heaviness. And now I'm starting to realize that my offense was actually a cloud of depression. And it was a cloud that I was seeing through. It was a fence that I haven't been able to see people clearly my whole life. It's been my soul feeling dry and dead and a little lethargic, not feeling very much energy, because of all the pain that I've stuffed. So how do we get free? Does anybody want to get rid of the fence? Anybody want to get free of a fence and not have it in our lives? I want to just talk briefly about it, of what's the tool that we can use. And as I'm talking about this, I want it to be I want you to understand that this is a journey that Katie and I are on. This is a tool that we use every single day of our lives. I am not giving you some self-help good ideas. I am giving you something that is our journey. This is our story. Katie and I, this is ours. And we're giving it to you as a gift. Because if we look at our marriage and our relationship and our lives, the circumstances haven't worked out the way that we thought they would. And there's been so much sin that we've done against each other. And if we didn't have this tool and we didn't walk in who we are, I'm telling you this, it would not be good. And our marriage would be on the rocks. And we've said many times, if we didn't have Jesus, it would have been over before it started. Because there's too much pain. There's too much hardship. Too much against our relationships. Too many potential fences. What I'm giving you is a gift that can save your future marriage or your marriage today. What I'm giving you could save your children from actually not being the outcast, being isolated, being by themselves, resenting all of their friends, and then walking into self-hatred. I'm giving you a tool that could change your children's lives forever If you taught them as they're growing from 3 to 6 to 8 to 10, so that when they're mistreated at school and there's a bully that comes into their lives, they actually know how to forgive rather than resent and build up fences and not be themselves for the next 20 years. It's destinies are at stake with you just listening and then putting into practice a simple tool. What is the tool? The tool is called notice, name, nurture. And many of you have heard it before. Before I talk about notice, name, nurture, I do want to say this, that if you've built up fences for years and you can barely see, and you know that when I even mention the demonic, you feel this like oppression, you're like, oh, I think there's issues going on inside, and I feel like I've opened the door to the demonic in my life. I want you to know that it's not scary. So I'm going to get to notice, name, nurture, but I have to talk about this. This is the end of spectator Christianity. If I don't talk about this and get real with you, then you're not going to be trained and equipped to know how to deal with the demonic, because the demonic is real, and Jesus walked the earth, and we see in the Gospels that he drove out demons. You were destined to drive out demons. You were destined to actually live into this. My 5-year-old boy and my 8-year-old girls have given their life to Jesus, I think. And they have, no, I'm sure that I know that they have, okay? They have more power and authority than every demon and Satan himself that has been gifted to them by the man who died on the cross and went into Hades and pulled out the keys of the kingdom and handed it to us, children of God. And so the Hollywood and the demonic have tried to fuel a fear narrative and have tried to convince you that you don't have power over every demon, and that it's a even fight. You have been placed with your foot on their neck since you gave your life to Jesus. I don't care how many demons they are. I don't care if it's Satan himself. You have power and authority to do this. You get to tell them what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. You've been given power and authority just because you're a child of God. But what, Pastor Josh, I just sinned though. It's not dependent on what you've done or haven't done. It's a gift. Just because you haven't unwrapped the gift doesn't mean that you don't have the gift. Jesus gave you power and authority over the demonic. It's not something to be afraid of. They have to obey you. So you lay the ground rules and you tell them what to do. And what I want to just draw your attention to a message that I preached called Sacred Cows. It was in the sermon series, Sacred Cows. And the message is titled Freedom. So if you want to learn more about deliverance, how to lead somebody into deliverance, how to do self-deliverance, go and listen.